Why are you making that face?
That's so sick. Perfect. All right.
Cool. Hopefully,
So, hi. Welcome back to Bummin Out with James. I'm here with, well, let's see, independent journalist, now author, and dear old pal from childhood, Masuma Ahuja. And I wanted to just plug, right, I got a copy of
So exciting.
her new book, Girlhood, and you should all pick one up. Do you have a preferred vendor, Masuma?
Wherever you buy books.
Great. Um, okay, so I guess just briefly tell us about this book project because it's fresh.
It is fresh. It's a little weird that pre-orders are like going out early. The book launches on February 9th, so it's like it's constantly surprising when people have it in their hands. And I'm like, what is this that you have in your hands? It looks familiar to me. Yeah, the book is a book about the lives of teenage girls around the world. It builds on a lot of work I've done in the past, particularly a series I did for The Lily, which is part of the Washington Post. Um, and the basic construct of the book is I have 30 girls from 27 different countries who share diary entries and photos with us and basically get to tell us in their own words, in their own images, on their own terms, what their lives look like and who they are. And then I provide a little bit of context, a little scaffolding around to help a reader along about their communities, their circumstances, their countries, the themes they pick up on, just taking the lead from them and helping bring people up to speed about the worlds that they exist in.
So two questions about that. I mean, the big one for me is because we've talked before about journalism stuff. I'm curious, how does the format of the book reflect or gel with your general philosophy about what journalism is or what it's supposed to be or what the role of a journalist is?
It's a good question. As a journalist, I like to give people the types of stories I cover primarily these days are women's and girls' lives, but in general, I look at human stories that help us understand people, power, politics around the world, and I like to give people space to tell their own stories. And I'm a guide for a reader, a guide to put things in context, to help put people's words and lives in context. But if I want to know what it is to be a teenage girl in Mongolia or in Missouri or in Mumbai, the best way to find out is to ask a girl there. And that's quite literally what I did.
So I suppose like digging deeper into that, then there is like a framing. So I was interested in reading through it because you do a really good job of writing. It seems for like an extremely general audience. You know, it's very unpretentious, and you define all the words that need to be defined, and it's great. And I think it's extremely accessible, and it really does accomplish that like reading people in their own words on their own terms. I couldn't help but notice as well, though. I mean, just by virtue of making a book, I mean, you're still structuring like the kind of information you're getting from them, and I don't really know what the process was like for that. I'd be curious to know a little bit about that. But also, I guess, how did you approach puzzling through like the way you frame the project, how you actually execute the project, in keeping with that spirit of trying to make it as much like their stories, not like because you're choosing how to frame it, right? You're choosing how to like set it up. So I guess what was that like as a dynamic internally creating
I
this?
mean, if you look at the book, it is primarily their words and me guiding a reader to to give you the context that you need to understand their words if you aren't familiar with things that they have talked about. So I really let them take the lead. And in terms of framing, I let them take the lead again in terms of, what are they writing about? What do their lives look like? What are they mentioning or not mentioning? A thing I was very conscious of, and part of the reason that this book emerged is I am very conscious of how girls' stories are told around the world and how girls are represented around the world. And when you look at the news, when you read the news, wherever you are, stories of girls primarily fall into three buckets: stories of victimization, stories of sexualization, like lots of gender-based violence, which is very important to talk about, um, but is far from the entirety of girls' lives, or stories of exceptional girls fighting back, the Malalas and Gretas of the world, and again, really important stories, and touch on the power girls have. But the vast in between is where most girls' lives exist, and we don't get a sense of the vast in between generally, and girls don't see themselves reflect. This is a book that is created for young readers, right? It's not created with a 35-year-old in mind. It's created with a 13-year-old girl who picks it up and wants to see what life is like for other girls. And so there's a lot of like ordinary girlhood that I was trying to touch on, but sometimes it made sense to bring in some of those headlines and say, hey, you might have read this about this place or this thing that this girl is writing about. This is a little bit to give you an understanding of like, this is the world she lives in. Now you're going to get to meet her and get to know her a little bit.
It's such a cool project. I'm
Thank
obsessed with this
you.
book. Um, what it in what to the extent that you can I guess talk about it. Like what was the process actually like in doing this? Like how like were these long correspondences, or were they like you kind of sent some questions to people, or like what was the deal?
It really depended on the girl, how I found her, how accessible she was in terms of, some of the girls I was getting to through NGOs who work locally. Some of the girls DM me on Instagram every few days still. Some girls I'm in touch with on email. Some people would respond very quickly and then say, hey, I have exams for the next 2 months. I'm going to be offline, right? Like they have lives that they're living. And so it really depended from person to person. I gave every girl in this book a broad set of instructions about what I envisioned a diary entry as, and then encouraged them to ignore my instructions and write about whatever they wanted to write about, because it's their space and they get to define their lives. But sometimes it was a question of like, what exactly do you want? Like, why do you care what I ate for breakfast, right? And those were the things that I had to tease out and also explain to them. This is what's interesting. Or someone would write about something and I would have like 17 more questions, and there would be a lot of following up and asking more questions. And sometimes I would, like one of the girls, Shanae, who's from New York, she she opened her journal and emailed me and was like, hey, what narrative arc do you think we should look at? Like, I'll send you photos from my journal, and are you interested in like school? Are you interested in like the boy I'm dating? Are you interested in something else entirely? Are you interested in like the slam poetry sessions I'm going to? And we figured out, what does she want to share. And she just sent me photos of her journal entries, and she wasn't writing anything specific for this. She had a journal and she was just sharing some journal entries, and then I asked her a bunch of questions and interviewed her to get some context.
That's so cool. Oh, I love that. I mean, so it's kind of like you helping them through the act of like, it's kind of their act of self creation, but it's there's still there's a dialogue happening,
There is a
right?
dialogue happening, but it's very much up to them what they. I'm going to keep saying this because it is very, very like at the heart of what I've done, and they're all young people, and this is going to exist in their lives for a long time. And I was very conscious of that and wanted to remind them of that regularly. And different people live in different cultural and political climates where sharing your life can mean different things. But really, it was up to them what they wanted to share, how much they wanted to share. They would sometimes tell me things and say, actually, I don't know if that makes sense in the book, and that was okay. That's their prerogative.
So I mean, as a teacher, I'm interested in this kind of working with youth in general. Like, how is it different doing this kind of work with children as a journalist um, compared to working with adults, for example?
I mean, this is my first book, and it is with girls, so I don't have a point of comparison for a project this large. Um, I would say it's essentially the same. Like, people are people, however old they are. It's just they're at a different life stage, perhaps. They, a thing that stuck with me in creating this book was all the girls are at the very beginning, right? And there's so much optimism, there's so much ahead of them, which is sometimes different when you're working with people who are later on in their lives, and a bigger part of their story might be the things that they have experienced or lived through, as opposed to the things that are ahead. So there's a little bit of framing there that's different. But in terms of like, people are people, people want to talk about their lives, people want people to be interested in them. None of that is particularly different.
And in terms of like the way because I mean this is the thing that I was always I'm just really fascinated by you as a journalist for a long time, because you're really you have a way of doing the thing that you do, and you're very dedicated to that approach, and like I don't know, have very very good reasons for doing it such, and it works. So it's really cool to get to see this kind of realized in this kind of project. And it's got me thinking a lot too, because this is a discussion that happens a lot in education circles, like about the agency of young people. But there is always this kind of divide in the approach of like, well, there is a kind of stewardship angle or a kind of mentor angle or whatever it is. Um, and I think too, a sort of like in a lot of the ways that teachers are trained in this country anyway, there's an attitude that you have to like, maybe you're like planting seeds or something, and then they're going to kind of grow later on with whatever tools you offer. But there still is this, again, it's kind of a stewardship mentoring thing. So does that dynamic come out at all, or is it really like would I guess would you agree with the kind of approach when people talk about like treating young people like adults? Like, I guess I'm not so sure. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I'm not an educate, like I'm not a teacher, and this is not what the book is, right? So like I would be hesitant to comment on that because I don't know about it. Like I don't know what makes sense or what is a better or worse approach in this space. Like I wasn't. I mean, I feel very like protective big sister vibes to all of these girls in the book, but that doesn't mean it in any way affected how it was framed. The only thing I hope that every girl who participated got from this, and every young person who picks up the book gets from it, is that all of their voices and stories matter and belong on the pages of books. Like, that's all I got.
You're the coolest. You're the coolest. So I just want one, or I guess two things, um, two final things. One, I guess, zooming out. What do you think about? This is more of a I don't know, potentially silly question, like armchair philosophy, whatever. But what do you think about the like authenticity as a paradigm when you're doing a journalist's work? Like, is that something which you like? Um, because this is something I know I feel oftentimes quite like I think about more than I really should, and I don't know how helpful of an idea it is. But is that a paradigm that has any kind of role for you in your work?
I don't know the honest answer. I mean, authenticity, when you say authenticity, I think a lot about social media and
Hmm.
the performative nature of what life on different platforms and like what living on a feed and in stories looks like. I hope this book is like, when I think about the work I'm creating in this book particularly, it felt very much like a response to that, in that it is curated, but it is less of a felt cute might delete later vibe in my mind. Um, at least I was trying to have it be a little bit of a different thing, and like here is a person in their personhood and like in the ordinary bits of their lives, and this is not just highlights and lowlights, this is what life looks like. So that in my mind is a response to the questions of authenticity that come up often when we talk about how a lot of people, especially young people, but all people, are, especially in the pandemic now, like a lot of our social interactions are through our feeds and through what we see other people's lives looking like on places like Instagram. That said, like as a journalist, the questions I come back to are more about like, what is the truth of the situation and how do I best convey it? I don't know if that's the same thing as a question about authenticity, but those are the guiding principles and guiding questions for me in my work.
So I guess would you say then that the um, do you think, I guess another way of approaching this, do you think that there were things which you were able to accomplish through this medium that you couldn't have accomplished through another medium, like a book of this sort?
Oh, of course. I mean, every medium is different, right? Like every medium has things that work for it and things that don't work for it. A thing that I had never anticipated being a fact of this book's existence that has come to be a thing that I think a lot about now is that the diary entries from this book are from 2019 and 2018 sometimes, because books have a very long life in creation. And in the interim, we're living through a pandemic which has shifted what life looks like. And so this is a snapshot of daily life that wouldn't have existed if I had done this project a year later or 2 years later. Like who knows what our world will look like for the upcoming future, right? And this is in some ways a good a good snapshot of that period of time. And if I had done it in another medium, it inherently would look different, right? Like if it was online, it would look different. If it was an Instagram page, it would look different. If it was a film, it would look different. That's just a fact of life.
That's I had not even considered that. That's so cool. That's awesome. Um,
Very intended.
so the final thing then is just over the course of doing this project, having now it's done, and now you're like, I mean, this has got to be the craziest moment. Like, I mean, what is it like at this point? Is you're just on the cusp? You're so close to releasing your first book that I already have it. So
Funny how that works, right?
yeah. So what's that even like?
I mean, the thing that I've been saying a lot of is the book is definitely not an end for me, it's a beginning, right? Like me publishing the stories, or my publisher publishing the stories of 30 Girls isn't at all the it for girlhood. Like if anything, it has made me realize and think more deliberately and start working in directions where I can do more work to create spaces for girls to tell their own stories. um, so yeah, that it's a strange thing in that, like, the book, when you're a creator of a project this large, there is a sense of like finality when it's out in the world, because it's the end of the process for you but the beginning of the life for the product. But for me, it's also, it feels like the beginning of just creating spaces for girls.
Well, I really look forward to seeing what you do in the future. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. I mean, I know it's going to be amazing. I'm just on the edge of my seat waiting, and I also can't wait to get through. I've only started the book now. I'm excited to get through the rest of it in the coming days. So, but the book is Girlhood, and our author is Masuma Ahuja. Again, independent journalist, now author. Dear old bud. We were friends when we were 12. Also, I wanted to say, I think the first person I ever knew who had their own personal website, which is fitting and exciting now. So, with an Enya song, which I really liked. Anyway, that's the
A whole weird aside. I went back to like look through. I don't have, in putting together the book, I had to like think about a lot of my own girlhood. And when my parents moved a few years ago, I like went back to clean out my stuff and didn't keep any of my journals because I didn't see the point. So I don't have any of my teenage journals. And then I was like, I need some sort of document of my girlhood years. Like, what does that even mean? Went on to like Internet Archive to try and find like old blogs. Apparently did not have enough visitors to have been archived by Internet Archive.
no Zanga.
That wasn't archived.
Shame.
Yeah. I also don't remember my password, so that's part of the problem. Yeah, and then like went through my old inbox and tried to like reconstruct something. And I'm very glad there are no archives of like 13-year-old muse creations. Yeah.
I remember when you mentioned that you got rid of your journals, I was like flabbergasted and kind of still am. And it's really funny that you did that. This was your first book project in light of that. And thankfully now, these 30 girls can throw out their journals too, because they'll save on the clutter, because now they have it all in a book, you know?
I stand by my decision at the time, but also I wish there was more of an archive now as an adult, like 4 years later.
Well, hopefully, I guess, well, yeah. I not much to do about that. Maybe someday you'll find those old internet records somewhere, in some kind of horrible back corner of the internet. We'll see. In the meantime, I know you're busy. I don't want to hold you up. Really appreciate you being here. You're the best, and just thanks very much for making time. And I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you for buying my book.